Let me ask you something. When was the last time someone had to wait for you? Not ignored, waited. When was the last time your yes actually meant something because it wasn't guaranteed? Here's the truth. Most people won't say out loud. Availability is a currency. It behaves exactly like money, exactly like time, exactly like any other finite resource on this earth. And like any currency, its value is determined by one thing: scarcity. The moment something becomes unlimited, it becomes worthless. Air is infinite, so we don't think about it until we can't breathe. Water is everywhere until you're in a desert. And you, your time, your attention, your energy, the moment you make yourself infinitely available, you have unknowingly told the world, I am worth nothing more than convenience. Think about that. Every time you drop what you matters to answer a call you didn't need to answer, every time you reply in 60 seconds to someone who takes 60 hours to reply to you, every time you say yes, when your body, your gut, your soul is screaming, no, you're not being generous, you are devaluing yourself in real time. And the tragedy is you don't even see it happening because it feels like love. It feels like loyalty. It feels like being a good friend, a good partner, a good employee. But I want you to understand something today. Overextension disguised as devotion is still overextension. And the market, the human market, the emotional market, it always adjusts to the price you set. Here's the psychology behind it. Human beings do not value what they can access without effort. This isn't cynicism, it's neuroscience. Our brains are wired for contrast. Dopamine isn't released by what we have, it's released by what we anticipate, what we're uncertain of, what we have to earn. So when you remove all uncertainty, when you're always there, always reachable, always the safety net, you remove the very mechanism that makes people appreciate you. You haven't created connection, you've created expectation. And expectation, unlike appreciation, comes with zero gratitude attached. So ask yourself honestly, and I mean honestly, where have you been overspending? Where have you handed out your presence like it's unlimited, like there's more where that came from, like you'll never run dry? Because I promise you, you will. I've seen it in boardrooms and I have seen it in bedrooms. I have seen the most brilliant, most loving, most capable people become invisible, not because they weren't valuable, but because they made themselves too easy to have. This is the turning point. This is where everything I'm going to share with you today begins. Because before we talk about boundaries, before we talk about self-respect, before we talk about detachment and energy and how the world responds when you change, we have to start here at the root. You cannot build a life of magnetic presence on a foundation of constant availability. They are mathematically incompatible. So today I want you to make a decision not to disappear, not to become cold, but to finally understand your own worth as a currency and to start spending yourself only where it counts. Because here's the truth I need you to carry out of this room. The world will only value you at the price you're willing to charge. And right now, most of you are giving yourselves away for free. Now let's talk about the word that scares people the most in this conversation: unavailable. Because the second I say it, some of you flinch. You hear unavailable and your brain translates it into cold, selfish, cruel, someone who abandons people. And that right there, that mistranslation is exactly what has kept you small, kept you overextended, kept you handing out pieces of yourself to people and situations that never deserve the full price of admission. So let's get precise, because precision is where transformation actually lives. Unavailability is not rejection. Unavailability is not punishment. Unavailability at its core is self-respect, wearing a boundary as a costume. Here's what I mean. Every time you say yes when your entire being is screaming no, you are committing an act of abandonment, not of the other person, of yourself. You're telling the deepest part of you, the part that knows what it needs. Your voice doesn't matter as much as their comfort. Do that enough times across years, across relationships, across a career. And you don't just lose boundaries, you lose the ability to hear yourself at all. You become a stranger in your own life, fluent in everyone else's needs and illiterate in your own. This is the psychological cost nobody talks about. We frame availability as generosity, but true generosity requires a self that is intact enough to give from what most people call generosity is actually depletion wearing a smile. And depletion isn't sustainable, it's a countdown. Ask anyone who is burned out in a relationship, in a job, in a friendship, and they'll tell you the same story. I gave and I gave and I gave and I disappeared. So when I talk about becoming unavailable, I'm not describing withdrawal, I'm describing return. A return to yourself. Because here's the paradox at the heart of all this. You cannot be fully present for anyone else until you stop being infinitely available to everyone. Else, presence and availability are not the same thing. In fact, they are often opposites. Presence is a choice made from fullness. Availability, the way most of you practice it, is a compulsion made from fear. Fear of being forgotten, fear of being replaced, fear that if you're not constantly proving your worth, you'll lose your place in someone's life. Let that sink in. If the only way you can keep a relationship is by being endlessly accessible, that was never a relationship, that was a transaction, and you were the one always paying. This is why the shift from always available to selectively present is not a personality change. It is a psychological homecoming. You are not becoming someone new. You're finally becoming loud enough in your own life to hear the person you buried under everyone else's expectations. And I want to be clear because this is where people get it twisted. This is not about manipulation. This is not a strategy to make people chase you. This is about no longer needing the chase to know your worth. When you show up now, you show up because you chose to, not because you're afraid of the silence if you don't. So here's what I want you to remember when the guilt creeps in, when someone calls you distant for simply respecting yourself. You were never put on this earth to be endlessly available. You were put here to be undeniably present. And those two things were never the same. Now, here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because once you stop overspending your presence, once you finally choose self-respect over self-abandonment, something happens that nobody prepares. You, for the silence you create, starts talking. And what it says is often more honest than anything anyone has ever told you to your face. Let me explain what I mean. As long as you are the one always reaching out, always initiating, always filling every gap in communication, every pause in connection, you never actually find out who these people are. You only find out who they are in response to your effort. That's not truth. That's a reflection. You've been staring into a mirror your entire life and calling it a relationship. But the moment you stop, the moment you let the silence sit there, untouched, unfilled, you create the one condition that reveals reality, space. And in that space, people show you exactly what you mean to them without your effort distorting the picture. Some people will step into that space immediately. They'll notice, they'll reach, they'll say, hey, I felt that shift. What's going on? Those people, remember them. Write their names down in your mind, because those are the ones who were never here for your performance. They were here for you. And then there's everyone else. The ones who don't notice, the ones who don't reach, the ones who simply continue on undisturbed because your presence was never load-bearing in their life. It was just convenient. And I know that hurts to hear. I know some of you are sitting with a name in your head right now. But here's what I need you to understand, that silence isn't cruelty, it's information. And information, no matter how painful, is always better than illusion. This is the psychological principle at play. We don't discover loyalty through words. We discover it through withdrawal. Anyone can say, you matter to me when it costs them nothing, but take away the constant access. Remove the guarantee of your effort and watch what remains. What remains is the truth. Everything before that was just noise dressed up as connection. And I want you to see the deeper philosophy here, because this isn't just about relationships. This is about how you've been living. How many areas of your life have you filled with your own effort simply because you were terrified of what the silence might reveal? Terrified that if you stopped pushing, stopped chasing, stopped over-functioning, you'd find out the truth was smaller than you hoped. That fear keeps people in jobs where they're invisible. It keeps people in friendships that only exist because they do all the reaching. It keeps people in love with the idea of being needed rather than the reality of being valued. So let this be your permission to go quiet, and let the quiet do what your effort never could, reveal what's real. Because here's the truth I need you to take with you. Silence doesn't end relationships. It exposes the ones that were never really there. And the ones that survive the silence, those are the only ones worth your noise. Now let's talk about energy, because everything we've discussed so far leads to this one truth. You cannot pour from a version of yourself that's been poured out into everyone and everything that asked. And most of you have been asked constantly by your job, by your family, by people who call themselves friends, but only show up when they need something, by obligations you never actually agreed to. You just never said no loud enough for anyone to hear it, including yourself. Here's what I need you to understand. Energy is not an infinite resource. It behaves exactly like the currency we talked about earlier, exactly like the presence we discussed in the last point. It has a ceiling, it has a limit. And every single time you say yes to something that drains you, you are, by simple mathematics, saying no to something that could have filled you. There is no such thing as a neutral yes. Every yes is a redirection of your one finite resource, your life force, away from something and towards something else. The question is never, should I say yes? The question is always, what am I saying no to by saying yes to this? This is why boundaries aren't walls. I need you to hear that distinction clearly. A wall keeps everything out indiscriminately. A boundary is intelligent. A boundary is a filter, not a fortress. It doesn't say nothing gets in. It says only what deserves to get in gets in. And when you finally start operating with real boundaries, not the performative kind you announce and never enforce, but the real, quiet, consistent kind, something remarkable happens. The energy you use to leak out to everyone who simply asked for it starts accumulating. It starts pooling. And for the first time in years, you have enough left over to actually invest it somewhere on purpose. Think about what becomes possible when you're not emotionally overdrawn by 5 o'clock every single day. Think about the goals you abandoned, not because you lacked ability, but because you lacked energy, because it had already been spent on obligations you never should have accepted. Think about the relationships that suffered, not from lack of love, but from lack of capacity, because you'd already given your best hours, your best attention, your best self to people who never even said thank you. This is the deeper philosophical shift. Unavailability to the wrong things is not a loss. It is the very mechanism that creates availability for the right things. You cannot be fully present for your purpose while you're fractured across 100 obligations that mean nothing to your future. You cannot build the life you say you want while operating on the leftover energy of everyone else's priorities. So I want you to do something uncomfortable. I want you to look at your week, really look at it, and ask yourself where your energy has been going, not where your time has been going, your energy, because you can be physically present somewhere and completely absent, hollowed out, running on fumes. Find the leaks, find the places where you've confused obligation with identity, where you've confused guilt with responsibility, and begin today redirecting that energy toward what actually deserves it. Your work, your growth, your closest relationships, your own becoming. Because here's the truth I want you to carry forward. Every boundary you build isn't a door closing on someone else. It's a door opening for the life. You keep saying you want, now here's something almost nobody talks about, and it's the piece that makes everything else we've discussed today actually work. It's not just about redirecting your energy. It's not just about creating boundaries or letting silence reveal the truth. It's about what happens inside your mind once you stop needing a reaction to feel okay. And that, my friends, is where real clarity is born. Let me ask you something. How much of your thinking right now today is actually clear? Not clouded by what someone might say, not distorted by whether they'll respond, whether they'll approve, whether they'll validate the decision you already know is right. Because here's the truth. Attachment is the enemy of clarity, not love, not connection. Attachment. The desperate, gripping need for a specific outcome, a specific response, a specific person to feel a specific way about you. When you're emotionally entangled, waiting for the text, replaying the conversation, needing the apology, craving the acknowledgement, you're not thinking. You're reacting in advance to something that hasn't even happened yet. Your mind is not in the present assessing what's real. It's in the future, negotiating for an outcome it cannot control. And a mind that's negotiating cannot simultaneously be observing. You cannot see clearly and grip tightly at the same time. It is psychologically, neurologically impossible. This is why detachment isn't coldness. I need you to separate those two ideas permanently in your mind. Detachment is not the absence of caring. Detachment is the absence of desperation. It's the difference between watching a situation and being consumed by it. It's the difference between standing in a forest, able to see the shape of every tree, versus being lost inside it, arms out, stumbling forward, unable to see past what's directly in front of your face. Think about the moments in your life when you saw a situation most clearly. I promise you, without exception, those were the moments you needed something the least. The relationship you saw clearly, you saw it after you stopped needing it to work. The job you finally understood wasn't right for you. You understood it the moment you stopped needing their approval to feel secure. Clarity does not arrive while you're gripping. Clarity arrives the moment your hands open. This is the deeper philosophy. Most people believe that letting go means giving up. It doesn't. Letting go means finally being equipped to see. You cannot evaluate a person, a relationship, a decision, or an opportunity accurately while you're emotionally starving for a particular result from it. Starvation distorts perception. It makes scraps look like meals. It makes inconsistency look like passion. It makes silence look like mystery instead of what it actually is, an answer. So today, I want you to practice something radical. The next time you feel that pull, that need for a response, a reaction, a specific outcome, I want you to pause and ask yourself one question. What would I see here if I didn't need anything from this? That single question will strip away more illusion in 5 seconds than years of overthinking ever could. Because here's the truth I want you to leave with today. You do not lose clarity when you let go, you finally gain it. The tightest grip has always produced the blurriest picture. Now let's bring this all the way home, because everything we've talked about today, the currency of your presence, the self-respect hidden inside every boundary, the truth that silence reveals, the energy you've been leaking into obligations that don't deserve it, the clarity that only comes when you stop gripping. All of it converges into one final, undeniable truth. The world treats you exactly the way you've trained it to. And here's what's fascinating. What's almost poetic about human psychology. The less desperately available you become, the more magnetic you become, not because you're playing a game, not because you've mastered some manipulative tactic you read about somewhere, but because you have finally stopped broadcasting scarcity of self-worth and started broadcasting the truth that you are a complete person, whole with or without their participation. Think about it. People don't actually value what's handed to them freely and endlessly. We've talked about this. It's not cynicism, it's neuroscience. But there's a deeper layer here, a philosophical one. When you're constantly, desperately available, you are, whether you realize it or not, communicating a belief about yourself. You're saying, my worth depends on your engagement. And people, even unconsciously, treat you according to the value you assign yourself. You're not just teaching them how to treat you, you are confessing in real time how you already believe you deserve to be treated. But when you shift, when you become selectively present instead of desperately available, when you let boundaries filter what deserves your energy, when you allow silence to reveal truth instead of anxiety to fill every gap, when you choose clarity over the tight grip of attachment, you send an entirely different message, not with words, with presence itself. You communicate, I'm not waiting on you to complete me, I'm already whole. And what I offer you is an invitation, not a plea. This is not manipulation. I want to be unmistakably clear about that. Because the moment you turn this into a strategy to control outcomes, you've missed everything I've taught you today. This isn't about becoming unavailable so people chase you. It's about becoming so anchored in your own worth that whether they chase you or not, no longer determines how you feel about yourself. And ironically, beautifully, almost mathematically, that is exactly the energy that makes people want to be near you. Because certainty is rare, wholeness is rare. And human beings are always drawn toward what is rare. So here's what I want you to do. When you leave this room today, I don't want you to go be cold. I don't want you to go be distant, guarded, unreachable. I want you to go be selective. Selective with your time, selective with your energy, selective with your presence, because selectivity, not scarcity, is the true source of magnetism. The goal was never to become unavailable to life. The goal was to become unavailable to what diminishes you so you could become fully, undeniably available to what elevates you. And when you do that, when you finally fully embody everything we've spoken about today, you won't just change how people treat you. You will change who you attract, what you tolerate, and ultimately who you become. Because here's the truth. I need you to carry out of this room and into the rest of your life. The moment you stop being available to everyone, you finally become unforgettable to the ones who matter and unforgettable to yourself. So let's bring it all together, everything we've walked through today. We started with a simple, uncomfortable truth. Availability is a currency. And most of you have been spending yourselves into bankruptcy without even knowing it. We talked about how unavailability isn't rejection. It's the purest form of self-respect, a homecoming to the person you buried under everyone else's expectations. We talked about silence and how it doesn't destroy relationships, it exposes which ones were ever real to begin with. We talked about energy and how every boundary you build isn't a door closing on someone else, but a door opening for the life you keep saying you want. We talked about clarity and how the tightest grip has always produced the blurriest picture. And we ended with the truth that ties it all together, that the world will always treat you exactly the way you've trained it to. Here's what I need you to understand as you walk out of this room today. None of this was ever about becoming distant. None of this was ever about walls or games or teaching people lessons. This was about something far more important. It was about remembering that you were never meant to be a bottomless well that everyone drinks from and nobody refills. You were meant to be a source, and a source doesn't need to prove its value by never running dry. A source simply is valuable by its nature, by its depth, by what it makes possible for everything that touches it. So somewhere between today and tomorrow, I want you to make a decision, not a resolution you'll abandon in a week, a decision. A decision to stop confusing self-abandonment with love. A decision to let silence tell you the truth instead of filling it with your own anxiety. A decision to protect your energy the way you'd protect anything else you couldn't survive without, because you can't. And a decision to loosen your grip long enough to finally see clearly what's actually in front of you. Because here's what nobody tells you about becoming unavailable. It was never about the people who leave when you stop chasing. It was about the person you finally get to meet in the silence yourself. Whole, undivided, no longer scattered across 100 obligations, 100 people, 100 versions of yourself you built just to be needed. That person has been waiting, not impatiently, not desperately, just available to you finally for the first time in years. So go become unavailable to everything that diminishes you. And watch, not with hope, but with certainty, how everything changes. Not because the world changed, because you finally stopped waiting for permission to become the one thing you were always meant to. Be undeniable.